Good morning. My name is Susan, and I am a compulsive overeater. And like all of you, I weigh and measure 3 meals a day from the gray sheet, write them down, commit them to my sponsor, and I do this no matter what. And abstinence, without a doubt, is the greatest gift in my life today. I am reminded of that constantly. Just a second, I want to get out of speaker view so I'm not just staring at me. I became first aware that I had a food problem by the time I was in, well, kindergarten is when I first remember that there was something going on, because my brother, the good skinny kid, got to have white slices with brown stuff spread on it, while I had brown slices with a leaf of something we are allowed to eat on it for sandwiches. And so I must have been the bad fat kid. And it became more apparent to me when I was in first grade, and we went out. It was lived in Virginia at the time, and my first grade class went out to a Christmas tree farm to look at Christmas trees. But the moms had come along, including my mother, and brought the little round baked things for us to eat. So while the other kids were out looking at the Christmas trees, I stayed around the plate with all the little round baked things, and I would try to sneak. I'd learned by now with the brown slices that you had to watch if people knew what was happening. And I would sneak over as soon as I thought I wasn't being seen and get another one. And then I remember, it floods me with embarrassment, shame right now, when one of the mothers looked at mine and said, "My, Susie certainly does love those blanks, doesn't she?" And just being flooded with shame. And it went on from there. And my mother was never unkind about it, except that she was never, and I'm 73, so this is back in the days when a lot of people talked about, oh, it's just baby fat. My mother always, and dad, had a little bit of being a little bit overweight problem, but not terribly, and they never believed in baby fat. And so for my own good, my food was, kept the way it was supposed to be. But of course, as soon as I was able to go visit little friends, I would do that. And I became the favorite of all the moms because they liked to feed people and I loved to be fed. I became very, very overweight. Fortunately, I had a pretty outgoing personality, and so I managed to have a lot of fun in school and enjoy my life. But hitting middle school and high school, then we call it junior high and high school, I remember the first time I had a real, excuse me, crush on a guy in middle school, and his kind of chatting with me one night to tell me how he really liked me and what a good personality I had, but then tell me about the crush he had on, of course, the skinny, good-looking girls. So for reasons that became clear later, I was also, not only because I wanted the attention, but it turns out, looking back, that I also had been pretty promiscuous from an early age. You would call it, I guess you used to call girls promiscuous, but I think I was 13 when I had sex for the first time, and I really liked sex, and I was aware of enjoying that sensation earlier. It turns out later that my compulsive overeating began. I didn't discover this until well into abstinence, that I, at the age of 50, that I had been sexually molested by a family friend, told my family and no one believed me. And being sexualized that early, when I was feeling an outsider, I ate, although much of my food was being monitored, and I liked having sex because that would mean a boy would like me or pay attention to me. And wasn't that the goal anyway? I mean, when you hit 8th grade or whatever, we strapped on our little brassieres and went into combat with all the other girls trying to get the prize. One of the things I remember most about high school was that I had a steady boyfriend finally, and my mother kept me on this food regimen. In fact, for lunch every day, she would send me to school with a can of Metrical and a fruit. And I'll mention Metrical because I never considered it food. It was, most of you are probably not old. It was this chalky, horrible stuff in a can. And but Friday nights, my boyfriend would pick me up and we'd go to the White Spot Drive-In. And man, I can tell you right now exactly everything that I ordered, which I can't tell you here. But that's what I remember most is Friday nights when I could go eat this stuff I liked. Parents were both alcoholic. And when I became a teenager and up later at night, it just became really problematic. And so at the age of 16, I had a nice boyfriend. Looking back, I realized that I got pregnant on purpose and I wanted out. And so I got married at the age of 16 and of course quit school because back then you weren't allowed to go to school if you were married, much less pregnant. I guess they figured if you were, you knew how to do it and you might tell some of the other girls who they assumed didn't know. But and then my eating was completely unleashed. My mother wasn't there to watch anymore. And I married this guy who had a family who ate country style. They were from Kansas. And they would pass around big bowls of stuff. In fact, I remember the first time that I went to dinner at his house as his date, and they passed him around. There was this big bowl of mashed things that, oh my God. I mean, I just kept taking him. And finally, his dad looked over at me and laughingly said, "Well, Susan, will you please pass looking at my plate?" And I felt again that horrible, deep shame. But man, once I was married and unleashed, that was it and got absolutely huge. And I would try all sorts of things. And also, when I was 18, well, my mother, when she was 18, her mother had committed suicide, and a year later, her father did in a fit of alcoholism. And my mother used to come in and wake me up in the middle of the night and sit next to me and poke me in the ribs and say, you know, my mother committed suicide. And she always believed it was because she quit smoking. I mean, because she started smoking in college. And she said, but you're pretty enough and smart enough and all this, you know, that I guess I was supposed to redeem the generations of women somehow. And when I got pregnant and got out of there at the age of 16, when I turned 18, my mother committed suicide. And I was quite sure I knew whose fault that was. And my comfort was in food. It's the only thing that made me think I belonged on this earth. So go on. I finished high school at night and then college and got divorced after 16 years of marriage to this young man. We just grew up to be totally different people, but cared deeply for each other, but just couldn't do that. And anyway, I eventually went to law school in Seattle and took my kids there in a truck that said Adventures in Moving. And it was. So then after I graduated, and here I was huge and much older than the rest of the students, because I was 39 when I graduated, and went to work as a prosecuting attorney for King County, and ate. And I remember my knee kind of just being a mess. And there was a woman who worked in our office, one of the paralegals, who had gotten a sew up your stomach thing, gastric bypass. And so I went to my doctor and demanded one so that I could be losing weight. And I mean, that was going to solve every problem that I ever had. And also my knee wouldn't hurt anymore because I'd be thinner. And my doctor just looked at me and said, "Susan, you're too young and you're too fat. And I'm not going to do it. These things only last 10 to 15 years. And we don't want to have to redo them." Well, I had gotten sober in Alcoholics Anonymous in 1988. And I wanted to lose weight, and my first introduction to Gray Sheet was at a dinner meeting, an AA dinner meeting, and there sat this slender, lovely woman. Her name's Colette A, and she brought Gray Sheet to Seattle, shoving lettuce in a measuring cup. And I remember sitting there watching her and thinking, what is going on? And somebody asked her about it, and completely nonplussed, she just said, oh, it keeps me honest, and went ahead with this thing. And I remember sitting there thinking, that's the most compulsive thing I think I've ever seen. And there I was at 5'1", 240 pounds, calling her compulsive, shoving food in my mouth.
5 minutes.
Thanks. But I decided I needed to do something. And eventually I went to an OA meeting. Back then, Gray Sheet and OA were part of the same system. And there she was with one other woman who were the only two people doing Gray Sheet. And in January of 1992, or maybe it was 91, I can't remember exactly, I got abstinent. Gray Sheet saved my life, made it well worth living. I lost all my weight quickly. I was ecstatic. My knee finally, and my knee had stopped hurting. But after a year or two, it finally did blow out because it had been wrecked. And my doctor said, fine, now we can give you one. I got married in abstinence. I had an abstinent wedding with all my Gray Sheet friends coming. It was marvelous. I married the love of my life. We'll have been married 25 years this month. And after 10 years almost of abstinence, it was in February of 2005, I was diagnosed with stage 4 kidney cancer and told I had 6 months to live. And I weighed and measured all the way through the first 5 months of this. And then here's the story I tell myself, that I thought, oh gosh, here I only have a month left to live because I was on the way out. I don't want to drink again and I don't want to smoke again, but God, I haven't eaten blah, blah, blahs for 10 years. And besides, I have cancer. Even if I live a little longer, this is my free ride to stay a size 6 forever. Well, obviously I didn't die, and they came up with a new drug. But at any rate, I fought for 5 years to stay alive, but I started eating and I didn't die, and I put on 70 pounds, which I thought was incredibly unfair. And then it took me over 13 years to get back to Gray Sheet because I told myself, I can't possibly do this anymore. I can't eat all those vegetables. And I just kept eating. And I would tell people in OA, oh, I used to go to Gray Sheet and I loved it and I was happy, but I physically can't do that anymore. Well, that was a load of crap. And I eventually realized through a book study, 2 of them actually, but one of them was that I was completely dishonest. No doctor had ever told me that. I was simply unwilling. And I got back to Gray Sheet, but wasn't very good on it. And then I read another book that gave me the truth about what I was doing. And by this time I was back in Gray Sheet, but had slid, as we say, slipped. And it said, do you really believe that eating is not an option? And I realized, when I looked back, I had said to myself, I don't want to drink again. I don't want to smoke again, but I want to eat. Somewhere in me, it was like, in case I live, I don't want to drink or smoke, but by God, I've decided that eating is still an option. And last fall, or last spring, a year ago, when we were setting out, we're snowbirds and we're leaving Arizona to come home to Oregon, I decided, after almost a year of Gray Sheet, that I needed a little break. I'd been having shoulder surgeries, and anyway, and I went on a binge that for 4 months that damn near killed me. I couldn't get enough. I couldn't stop eating. It was all I thought about. It was everything. And finally, I knew that if I had 2 choices, I could keep on, and I literally would die, probably from a heart attack. I thought of exploding was the vision I would see, or I would have to get abstinent. part of what happened with this new drug they gave me for the cancer all those years ago was that it turns out it messed with your fats and it wrecked my heart and I'd had to have a bypass.
1 minute.
Thanks. So I got abstinent. It'll be a year on July 15th. And oh my God, I am alive. I am sane again. I love the Zoom meetings and Marco Polo. I have a fabulous sponsor who is here today and a lot of people that I am on groups with and I see at meetings, and my life at the age of 73 is probably more joy-filled, happy, joyous, and free than I've ever been in my entire life, and I owe it all to Grey Sheet. And my husband will say, yep, that's right. I think I scared the hell out of him when I was on that binge. He'd never seen it quite like that. So thank you all for my abstinence and for asking me to share this morning.